you're responsible for some quite dramatic moments last year in Cancun. What's happened since then? What's your update on the talks?
Almost 1 year has passed, and we can say that the Cancun agreement was a bad deal, but here we can have an agreement that can be even worse than that. Why? Because the level of emission reductions that rich countries want to do is going to lead the world to an increase in the temperature of 4 degrees Celsius. That means for Africa 9 degrees Celsius more. They are going to cook the continent, cook Africa. So if we would have seen that after Cancun, developed countries begin to increase their pledges of emission reductions, we could say we are moving on the right direction. But what has happened is the opposite. They are saying we're going to stick to this, and here the negotiation is only around the form. Are we going to package this with the name of a Kyoto Protocol or a decision or a mandate for a new legally binding agreement? But the real discussion, we all know, is the discussion on the number. How much developed countries are going to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions this decade until 2020? Because you can say, okay, we're going to do better the next decade, but in climate change, what you don't do now, you won't be able to recover it or do it in the next decade, because the CO2 that goes into the atmosphere remains there for 100 years. So that is the biggest problem that we are facing here.
And so where's the hope coming from with these talks?
The hope is coming from the people. I think that the only way we can change the course of negotiation is if there is social pressure. Social pressure not only here in Durban, in South Africa, but in different parts of the world. I think the hope is in the movement of Occupy Wall Street, in the Indignados in Europe. If we all come together and say, hey, the 1% of the population cannot define the temperature that we, the 99% of the population, are going to have to suffer, then there is the opportunity to change this. To do it only through diplomatic strategies, it's not possible.
And are you optimistic about the potential of the Occupy Durban movement and the Occupy movement worldwide?
I'm very optimistic. You know, I lived in New York 4 months ago, and almost in February, March, nothing was happening there. And suddenly you have a movement that in very few months has grown in a very impressive way inside the US, and it has linked to other movements in Europe and in the South. And this has happened in less than a year. So I think we are facing a new situation where the people, where the civil society is just saying enough is enough. And they are beginning to express themselves, and we are seeing the emerging of this. That is why I'm very optimistic from that side, not from this side.
So in light of that, what should we expect come the end of 2 weeks' time? What are we hoping to achieve here? Why are we all here?
We are here as civil society, as social movement, to clearly say to them, a deal of more than 4 degrees Celsius is a genocide, it's an ecocide. The African group has the responsibility to stop that, because the first ones that are going to suffer that are going to be Africans.
I just want to touch on your experience within the negotiations. There's a report come out from the World Development Movement in the UK this week saying small countries are bullied by big countries are doing everything they can to stop these talks progressing. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it is true. I mean, it's public. When we opposed the Copenhagen Accord, 1 month later, the US cut the aid to climate change projects in Bolivia and also in Ecuador. So there is this kind of pressure. Many of the delegations here in Cancun, they came to us and told us, you're right. the figures of emission reductions are very bad, but at least we're going to get a little bit of the money that they are offering. That's called fast start financing, $30 billion for the first 3 years. Now, 2 years have passed, and that money hasn't come. What I see in the inside is many delegations of developing countries saying, hey, we agreed to Cancun because there was going to be money, and now even that money doesn't exist. From our point of view, nothing. There is no money that can justify selling the lives of your people and the children of your people.
And what's your prediction for the end of these talks? What do you think will be the outcome of this process here?
Well, we have different scenarios. We have a good scenario that at least the number of emission reduction increases. We have a very bad scenario that it's locked. The figures of Cancun are locked and they won't be moved during the whole decade, because that is also one of the biggest possibilities. And we have the third scenario, that is that at the end the negotiation will keep on moving for 1 year more because nobody agrees to lock these figures because they are very bad for humankind and nature.
Pablo, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.